I want to rediscover the lost art of making Damascus steel barrels. When I first laid eyes on one of these things, with a gorgeous pattern running in a helix along the tube, I knew that this was something that I really wanted to try. A perfect canvas for the art that is pattern-welded steel. And what seems to me as a next to impossible weld makes Damascus barrels so special in my mind. Though Damascus barrels ended up being statement pieces for the rich and famous, they came to be because of the material challenges at the time. Instead of jumping straight to Damascus barrels, I want to go back through time and actually explore the origins of tubing and the very first barrels that needed to be made from wrought iron. For water pipes, the Romans used hollowed out elm, the Greeks used bronze and lead, the Egyptians used copper, but until there was a desire for a strong barrel in a firearm, iron tubes had never been seen. So the early blacksmiths tasked with making gun barrels needed to develop their own brand new techniques and processes. But they had an issue. Unlike the steel that we get off the steel rack, they would have been working with wrought iron. Now, wrought iron is anisotropic. It's like wood. Find some wood. The word has Greek origins, and it effectively means not the same in all directions. Like wood. You see, we have the grain running longitudinally here, which means that if I try and bend it this way, it's quite flexible, it's quite strong. But if I try and bend it this way, it snaps. That's because of the grain. Wood is not the same in all directions, and neither is wrought iron. If this was a bar of wrought iron, it would have a grain running its whole way down its length, just based on how it's manufactured. And that grain comprises of drawn-out inclusions of slag, and if you keep it all going in one direction and you stress it in one direction, it's perfectly strong. But, much like wood, it can break apart in the other. This book has been an incredible reference. This is a bar that Bessemer demonstrated in 1905. Now, this wrought iron provided a problem for early barrel makers. If this was a barrel, when the gunpowder explodes, the forces are coming straight out radially, causing hoop stress, and a common failure mode was longitudinally along those fibers. But even in the 1700s, Portuguese blacksmiths had spotted this problem and found a solution. That was to take their wrought iron bars and forge them out into flat plate. Then cut them off, and then bending and rolling them so that the grain flowed around the circumference of what would become a tube, with the grain now 90 degrees to the axis of the bore. Flowing around, they proved to be much stronger. They would forge weld the seams together and then weld a number of these 8-inch long tubes together to form the length of a barrel, and that was early barrel making. And I want to give it a shot. But unfortunately, I don't have all the right tools at the moment to make a barrel like they did in the 1700s. I've just got an anvil here. I need a swage block. So I'm gonna nip down the road and see my old mate, Nigel.
Yeah, that'll do the job. Always good fun to visit Nigel. That is almost done in about 30 seconds.
He burnt it, I cut the edge off.
That's lunchtime at Nigel Barnett's forge. So, what are you working on at the moment?
At the moment, what we're doing is we're doing a similar project at Hillington Hospice. This time it's 4,000 dragonflies, which have got to be in by August the 18th. They're selling them through their website. We are getting paid to make them, but we're doing them as cheap as we can, so we're virtually doing them at cost to raise them another load of money.
4,000 of those for sale to a good cause.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So,
you're going to be busy. There's going to be
3,999 to go.
Swage block secured. Thank you. Oh, it needs a wire wheel, doesn't it, Jamie? This thing's obviously not going to be much use on the ground, so we've got to make a stand. So what's the plan? Well, this is our key reference from 1718. Portuguese blacksmiths, smith and striker, starting with small plates of steel that they are then rolling with the help of a bottom swage and a top fuller or top swage into the beginnings of a tube. The book details that the plate has a rhombus cross-section to it. And I think that's so that it makes the scarf for the weld joint. So I think by rhombus cross-section, they mean this. So these angles are our bonding surfaces, and so that's what we're going to try. For our first attempt, I'm not gonna be using Damascus steel. We're just gonna be using regular mild steel, pretending it's wrought iron. So we're gonna get some steel off the rack, get it to the length and width that we need, put a little rhombus on it for our scarves, and start forming it. The proportions of what I'm cutting look really different to that, but that's based on the maths. 12mm bore, 25mm OD, 6mm wall, should be 18mm by 3.14, 56mm wide, so we'll see. Maybe we're about to learn why that was a square as opposed to a long rectangle. Woo! Oh yeah! Old school, hot rasping, baby. What this is doing is forming a scarf for the weld. The scarf extends the amount of material on the joint, make it stronger, but also means that it blends it much better. So that's that parallelogram cross-section right there. Now, we get to use our new swage block, well, new to us swage block. I'm going to come in here in this large one, start wrapping it into a cup. Keeping the workpiece clean is going to be our big challenge with this project. All the way through, from the most basic 1700s techniques of small sections welded together to the incredibly elaborate Damascus steel barrels. Keeping the material clean at the welding interface is probably going to be my biggest struggle. It makes a banana. Doesn't seem like the maths is going to work out. That doesn't look like it's going to possibly end up in a tube, does it? Right in the face. Oh, in my mouth. I don't particularly understand how this seam is going to work. Why is it a parallelogram? I almost think it should have been like a trapezoid shape. Unless I have to tuck that one way further in. Okay, so I'm just starting to tuck this near side underneath the far side. It just doesn't look right, does it? It should be right, because if you unroll that, it'll definitely look like this. Because like if you were to just take a circle like that, cut it like this, it would then look like this, because the diameter here is much shorter than the diameter there. But we're trying to make this angled scarf joint, so surely it must look like this.
This is not supposed to have a mandrel in it when you're forming it then.
That is our next step, Jamie. There is a point in time where you can't just hammer on it without anything inside, and that same technique of using a mandrel inside it, as we saw in the video of reacting to the 1925 Damascus barrel making videos, that same technique was in existence in the 1700s. Here inside the tube is a mandrel, and we have some other illustrations of the mandrels here. It's tapered, and it has a 90-degree bend on it, so you can knock it off. We need to make a mandrel. Now, I have ordered some proper steel for these. What I mean by proper steel is not mild steel. Mild steel with only 0.2% carbon doesn't have the alloying components to it necessary to keep it very hard at elevated temperatures. Even a few hundred degrees Celsius is really going to make the strength of this stuff suffer, which means that as we beat on it with a hot bit of tube around it, it risks deforming. Do I imagine the Portuguese blacksmith of the 1700s had access to H13 hot working tool and die steel? No. So they probably had similar issues with mandrels that were deforming. And so, in all likelihood, we should survive with some regular old mild steel. One mandrel a la Portuguese. Let's see how far on she goes. Not as bad as I worried it might be, you know? It goes on a little bit. Unfortunately, my helper doesn't have a sledgehammer in his hand, he has a camera in his hand. So we're missing some component of the authenticity for the benefit of you guys watching. Oh, look at that. Well, that was nice. Look at that. You can see how hot it got. Up here, about 250 degrees Celsius, about 190, then probably about 300 or 400 degrees Celsius there. Wow, this is really not easy. It looks disgusting. It looks really awful. What a disgusting mess. It's so uneven, and the seam doesn't at all look at all close to being scarfed over and ready for welding. And unfortunately, every heat I take, I know is making the material that we plan to weld so dirty with that scale, the iron oxide. And in case it's not abundantly clear why it needs to be clean, in order to do a forge weld, otherwise known as a diffusion bond, we are trying to bond it at an atomic level. And that means that anything within there that isn't the material we're trying to bond makes an inclusion, and that includes our iron oxide or our scale. That won't bother. I think I have to start trying to weld it. All right, let's give that a really good clean. Now I'm gonna flux it. You might say, oh, Alec, that commercial flux you're using with the iron powder in it, how's that authentic? Well, this description is from 1808. Some squabbles, the smallest chips from drilling the barrels, sprinkled a length of several inches, and the tube returned to the hearth and brought to welding heat. What they're describing is using the small chips from turning and drilling and putting it on the seam. This flux contains not only borax, but also iron filing. It acts as a little bit of a filler, and even in 1808, they recognized that that helped forge welds go. Okay, here we go, forge welding. Come on, baby. Oh, I opened up back here, though. Something tells me that's not a very good forge weld. Not really off to a roaring start, are we, Jamie? It wouldn't be interesting if it was easy, would it? It looks a little bit more closed up here in those first 2 inches. That second welding heat's done a good number on it. Just right there's a little gap. That might not have welded. Why is this so hard? Just getting so ugly. You know, I know cognitively how important weld prep is as a general topic. And this seam was all over the place and all nasty. I don't know why I expected anything was going to happen from it. It's this area here where it opened up on my first welding heat, and I've just not been able to close it up since. No matter what the maths says, I don't think I had enough material. That there is not a 12mm bore, and that is not 24mm on the outside diameter, but that's the closest we've got to getting it welded. So perhaps the maths is lying. And that is the question mark we had earlier regarding the proportions of these plates. There's also some dimensions given in here later. It talks about having a flat bar that wide compared to the material we cut, which is that wide. Maybe I need to be making this out of much wider steel. Tell you what, Jamie, it's been hot and sweaty here in the workshop the last few days, everywhere apart from my giblets, because I'm wearing MeUndies, the best underwear on the planet, in my opinion. Potentially I'm biased because they did sponsor this episode, and they do send me their delightful underwear, but I actually recently spent my own money to buy even more of it because they're so nice that I just don't want any other underwear in my collection. Check this out.
This is becoming a common occurrence in here, isn't it?
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I got some shorter ones. They're just as delightful as the longer ones. They're just a couple of inches shorter. They're made out of a fabulous micromodal fabric that is very lightweight, gloriously stretchy, and very breathable. The ones I recently bought, navy, black, very simple, but they've got designs that will blow your socks off. Kissing penguins, dinosaurs, beautiful patterns, you name it. MeUndies has a design that you're gonna love. What you absolutely must do, especially on scorchers like today, is try their ball caddy technology. It's a pouch to slip your nuts in and keep them off of your sweaty legs. MeUndies also has a great range of loungewear as well. There's a ton of underwear options for the ladies out there. Best of all, they've got a problem-free philosophy. If you're not happy with your first pair, it's on MeUndies. You'll get your money back. Slide into game-changing comfort by getting 20% off your first order plus free shipping by going to MeUndies.com/forge using code FORGE at checkout. The link is in the description below. Let's get back to it. We've done a little rehearsal. We've learned a thing or two. We're going to straighten it out, and we're then going to cut some slices on it and look inside the material to see, did it actually weld? What can we learn from what we've done so far? There's a hole here. It actually looks fairly welded here on the second section. It's about an 1/8 inch of delamination here on the third, another 1/8 inch here on the fourth. Now, interestingly, this all started as 6mm flat bar. Some of the wall thicknesses got thicker, 6.4mm, and at the seam, 7.5mm. So as we've been forging it, instead of it thinning out as we forge it over the mandrel, it has actually been upsetting against itself and getting a thicker wall, re-emphasizing why I need to start with a wider sheet and I can't just rely on pie. Let's cut a new bit of metal and try again. There's the cross section. Ah! Scale in the finger! Oh, it's the worst! Okay, a little methodical like. I'm gonna close up one side, then now I'm gonna push this side over. What do we think about that? It is looking neater, although don't like how it's looking here. You see, it's too flat. I need to get that curving around inwards more. Better. That's better, isn't it? Much closer to a better joint. It's time to flux it. Nice heavy dousing of the stuff, eh? In the forge. Oh, you see that heat differential there at that seam? That's exactly the type of thing you don't want to see. That tells you it's not welded. God, it just looks like crap. What I'm looking at is up here. Like, if the end is bad, I can always cut it off, you know? But like, if it's good up here, that's what counts. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's good up there. All the way around. Come on, weld, please. It is not just at the very end that it looks so ugly. It's way deep. That inner lip is completely separated. As much as earlier I said we were going to try with allowing it to be a larger inner diameter because we can always make it smaller, potentially we've just run into an issue here. Too large an inside diameter means that those lips just fly all over the place. You want to jump in, Jamie?
You need some help welding, do you?
I do indeed.
Right, what do you actually want to do?
Hit where I hit. Most importantly is we're trying to be pretty quick. All right, here we go.
What do you think?
I don't know. Maybe it's good here. Definitely not good up there, though. Maybe, maybe, maybe. I think we're gonna flip it over and go in from the other side. Ah, shoot! Got the mandrel bent. Bloody nightmare. Get in that hole. I don't know if this is physically possible to weld with so much iron oxide.
Is that a mandrel?
No, it's actually a curly rat tail.
Hey, it looks like a mangle.
A mangle. All right, slow and steady, gently does it. Maybe you can tap it out from your end with the sledge. Jamie, the helpers in Belgium don't have anything on you.
I think I know why this isn't going flawlessly.
Why?
Neither of us have got mustaches.
What? Did it fall off? Did it fall off? That seam just keeps popping up. It kind of seems like I can make the inner diameter smaller and I can make the wall thickness thicker as we hammer on it. And it definitely seems to be the case because what's happened is we have overlapped those seams, the welding seams. They've overlapped more and more and more with every welding heat that I've taken. Possible they're not even welded at all. The result is it's completely off center and the bore is absolutely tiny. Ah, come on. Don't you tell me you're stuck.
Hey, you welded it!
Didn't want to weld the mandrel to it, Jamie. One of the things I should have thought about is perhaps starting with a larger mandrel. Given that we can make the internal bore smaller, the book describes ending up with a bore after forging that was a 1/2 inch in diameter, so 12 millimeters in diameter. This is a 12 millimeter mandrel. Perhaps to get to a 12 millimeter final bore, we need to start for this technique with a larger mandrel than 12 millimeters and work our way down as time goes on. Maybe that's a missing element here. You've got to be kidding me. Great.
You really need to grow a mustache. I mean, what are you expecting to happen without a tash?
Oh! Why haven't they done this technique since the 1700s? Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's really difficult and all the future innovations are going to be way better than this. Maybe this should have stayed in the 1700s. Come on! That's never coming apart. Here's what we're going to do, Jamie. For science, not because I want this to be destroyed, we're going to cut a few more slices and we're going to see, did our seam weld? Then what we're going to do is we're going to make a new mandrel of this size, because I've ruined this one. Then we're going to make a mandrel of a larger size and try and do the exact same thing that we've just been trying to do with that one little change of a larger mandrel. See what it looks like. So starting from the end sample, if we look really, really closely, we can see complete and total failure. Second one, complete and total failure. Third one, complete and total failure. Fourth one...
Can I guess?
Actually, it almost looks like there's a weld there. However, from the other end, we have to be really quite generous to say that that's welded. Fifth one, complete and total failure. And our final one, only if we're being generous, is that welded. So, back to it. Take 3. Hello, are we getting somewhere? Is this us getting somewhere? Here at the front, I think that's the best prep for a weld that we've had so far. It's a little bit more open than I'd like. So what I've been doing at this low temperature is just trying to force it closed just that little bit more.
trying to tighten it up around the mandrel so that scarf is just perfect. This is something I didn't do on the previous ones, was really cold working the piece before we got to forge welding. It means I can fiddle with it while it's not oxidizing, and I'm hoping this is the trick, guys. That looked a lot more promising. Oh, go on. That is the best that the seam has looked so far. Right, let's clean this all up, and then I'm gonna flip it around in the forge, and we're gonna weld this from the other side. You know, this whole concept is we're doing barrel making as if it was done in the 1700s. The chronology that I have in my head might be a little bit messed up here. You know, we're obviously talking early 1700s here, but later on in the 1700s, Damascus barrels did appear with that helical wrapped construction. So it might be that this technique was being pursued in tandem with Damascus barrels, potentially as a means of making lower cost barrels. I definitely know this supposedly is the cheaper way to make a barrel. Considering how much bloody headache I'm having so far, I don't know how much of that I believe, but they probably knew what they were doing back in the day. While I was hammering these seams a little bit closer, quite cold, looks like a crack might have appeared. Got about ½ inch of cracking there. Ah, what the hell was that? What made that noise? A jumpy man would get scared at a moment like that. Not me, I was not scared at all. Okay, this is fluxing the last... fluxing the last portion to weld.
You just said you didn't get scared.
I was lying! That end is open for sure. Oh no, I don't like how the heat isn't conducting. See, there's a black spot here, lighter spot there. The heat isn't conducting through that seam very well, which tells me it might not be welded, of course. Let's do a nice long strip of flux again. Come on, please! Please! It looks like it! I've bloody well done it! A pretty consistent, even heat, apart from this inch up here. Come on! No! Even bigger crack just opened up in the middle. One little cleaning up heat. We're gonna let it cool down and inspect it. We really take for granted just a regular old bit of steel pipe today. Because to make a tube was no small task back in the day. Now, everything we've just done could be achieved by pulling that little bit of steel off the steel rack. Most modern tubing is constructed in a similar way. You'll see it has a seam running down it. This is the seam from when this tube was taken from a flat bar, wrapped around, and then welded in a similar manner as how my bandsaw's blade welder welds blades together. The inside seam is always really visible on modern tubing. Similar in concept, very different in execution, and of course, entirely done by machine. This does build to a further point, which is, I'm exploring the techniques of barrel making. What I'm not doing is making a part for a firearm. That's not happening. What we're doing is no different to pulling a bit of scrap steel out of the steel rack. We're doing tube making. That's it. So, on the end, we have about 1/4 inch of delamination. In the middle, we have 1.5 inches of delamination. The near side, this is one we've got really out of hand. About 3/4 inch of delamination. This one is really the most catastrophic. It doesn't surprise me that the end of the pipe doesn't weld very well, and that the middle welds better. I'm quite upset that that seam opened up here in the middle. The inside actually looks fairly clean. What I'm gonna do before we start taking our slices, I'm actually gonna run on the grinder, and we're gonna grind the outer diameter, have a little visual underneath the forge scale first. This is after grinding. No weld, weld, delamination, weld, no weld. All right, from the end, there's the obvious open seam. On the other side, look at that. That's not bad, is it? Can you even see it? Then the other side of the cut starts to get a little bit worse, but absolutely acceptable. There's about 1/2 millimeter of seam visible right there, but you would bore through that, no problem. Obviously, the other side, where the crack has begun, it is not welded. We can see the gap. We knew about that. Next piece, other side of the cut, same issue. However, over here, another 1/2 millimeter of seam, and then it's welded. Get in. Same on the other side of the cut. We have, not totally successfully, but at least partially, been able to forge weld our own tube
like they were done back in Portugal in the early 1700s. So as I mentioned earlier, the general principle with making these relatively short tubes is you make a bunch of them, you then forge weld 2 tubes together, so on and so forth, by flaring, chamfering, and again, forge welding on a mandrel to make a whole barrel tube. Those short tubes could be made from wrought iron or could be made from Damascus, but what I really want to do is the helical Damascus steel welding, and that's what we're going to do in our next installment of this project. Thank you for joining me. Thank you to MeUndies for sponsoring this episode. Go to meundies.com/forge, get yourself a great pair. Appreciate your time. Bye-bye.